Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let's hope this works, everyone. Hello to everyone who's here. I can't really see who is here, but we will have time for questions afterwards. So today I'm going to be talking about resumes, why resumes are important, how to put together a great resume, and different types of resumes. So let's see if this works. Okay, awesome. I don't know can everyone see that? Maybe one person can say yes.
We're seeing you perfectly. That's awesome, Jacqueline. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. I will continue. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about resumes and the purpose of your resume, the different parts of a resume. So, when you're putting a resume together, what would make an effective resume? And then we'll quickly at the end look at different types of resumes. Depending upon your situation, you may want to use a variety of different types of resumes. So, the purpose of the resume. I like to say that a resume is a marketing piece. It's like your calling card to an employer. It's a marketing tool and it helps to sell your expertise, your skills, what you would bring to the job for the potential employer for the company that you've applied to. So a good resume is going to show off your skills. It's going to show what assets you will have in comparison to someone else who's applied for the job, and also some of your accomplishments. And we're going to talk later about how to put together accomplishment statements on your resume. A good resume is also really clear and easy to understand. If your resume is not clear or it's too confusing, it's likely that the person who's reading it will just kind of throw it to the side, unfortunately, and move to the next resume. A good resume will also help you to open doors to obtain a job. That's really why you're creating your resume and sending it off for a job application. And I love telling people this last line. A resume shows potential employers what you can do. So when I look at a resume, if I have a job posting, we have one right now, so we're looking for another coach at our facility. When I get a resume, it tells me what skills and experience that person has and kind of what their hard skills are, what they can actually do. The interview, which is the next step, tells us who you are. So your resume is an opportunity to get in front of an employer to be able to tell them about yourself. Okay, so if we're looking at the different parts of a resume, this is a very generic resume that's here. Obviously, you are going to create a resume that speaks to your particular skills and experience, but this is just a basic guideline. So obviously your resume should have a heading at the top, and the most important thing is your name, and your name should be in bold letters. It should be larger than the rest of the information on the resume. You really want that to stand out. And then in the heading, you want to have your address if you feel that you're okay with adding the address. If you don't need to. Sometimes people put their address because they want the employer to know that they're close by to the company. And that may be valuable for the company to know that that person would be easily able to get to the job, versus if you're applying for a job in Oshawa and you live in Mississauga, that may not be seen well by the employer. You obviously need to have some kind of contact information. So a phone number and an email address. How is the employer going to reach you if they decide that they actually want to set up an interview with you? And you want to make sure that your email address is something professional. So it's not going to be hotpants222@gmail.com. If you're able to get, like your first and last name at whatever the domain is, something very professional, because even your email address will speak volumes to the employer. And then if you have a LinkedIn profile, and I'm hoping everyone here does, you can also add your LinkedIn profile link, and you're able to customize that link as well to make it meaningful to you. I've customized mine so that it has my actual full name, and the employer can easily click on that link when they get your resume, and it's going to take them directly to your LinkedIn profile page. Underneath that, if you want, this is optional, and it depends on the job and the industry, you could add a job title. But what's really important is to have either a summary or highlights and qualifications for the job or related to the job and industry that you're applying to. So here, this person is applying to a retail clerk position, and they've added as a summary, retail professional known for exemplary customer service, team player mindset, and exceptional cash handling accuracy. Received consistent exceeded expectations ratings on yearly performance reviews and was named Employee of the Month on several occasions. So if I'm an employer looking at this, it tells me a few things about this potential candidate. They're a great team player. They give great customer service. They've actually been recognized for the level and quality of customer service that they've given at previous jobs because they've gotten awards for them. Underneath that, you want to list any core skills that you have, again, that are relevant to the job. So you're going to find as you're applying to jobs that you will likely have more than one version of your resume, depending upon maybe the industry or type of position that you're applying to. And the skills that you list under your core skills area should be relevant to the job, either specific hard skills that you have, transferable skills that you've gained from another job, but anything that would be absolutely essential for an employer to know that you have. You probably also want to put in here skills that you've seen on the job description that match skills that you also actually have. The next section is your experience section. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of your resume. It's going to explain to a potential employer what you've been doing in the past in your career. So you're going to outline particular duties that you've had and accomplishments that you've made in your job. And we'll talk about the difference between duties and accomplishments. And you can see under there, under the experience, the person has listed the title that they had, the name of the employer where they worked, the town where that particular job was in, and then the start and end dates. And it's enough just to have the month and the year for when they started the job and then ended the job. And then the last thing you would have would be any kind of education that you have that's relevant, certifications, training certificates that you have, again, that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. So that highlights and qualifications section, if you're going to use highlights and qualifications, you want to use a bulleted list similar to what you're seeing at the top of the screen. And if you're going to do a summary, then you want to have a paragraph format, so similar to what you're seeing right now at the bottom of the screen. So some tips for the experience section, you want to describe each of your previous positions from the most recent to the oldest. And this is kind of the most popular format of a resume. And we're going to talk about resume formats near the end, but this is chronological. So you're looking at the most current. So it could be the job that I'm in now, or if I'm not currently working, the most recent job that I had, down to the oldest. And if you don't have lots of work experience, so maybe you're a new graduate, for example, you want to include any relevant volunteer experience as well. So anything that speaks to, even though it was unpaid, experience that you may have in the sector that you're trying to get into, or volunteer experience that could talk to some skills that you've developed that would be a great asset to the job that you're now trying to get into. Your heading, as I mentioned before, is going to have the job title, previous, current employer, their location, and your dates of employment. And then the body, so where you're describing the duties and accomplishment statements, you should have at least 2 one-line descriptions and at least 1 accomplishment statement. So this section doesn't have to include all the experience that you've had ever. And people ask me this all the time. Should I include all the work that I've ever done? No, you don't need to. And is it okay for me to not include some of the work that I've done? Will the employer consider that lying? No. And I'll give you an example. So I do training, but I also work in employment services. So I have a different training resume than I do for my employment services work. I'm not lying by leaving off my training experience on the employment services resume because it's not relevant to that particular job. And so you would be doing the same thing. Maybe you have a customer, you're looking for customer service, you would have a customer service resume. Maybe you do web design on the side, you would have a different resume. So you're going to include any experience, any skills that you have that are most beneficial for the job search and the position that you're specifically applying to. So hints for your experience section. Your experience can come from your work, as we talked about, volunteer work that you may have done that's relevant. So even if you're someone who's been in the work world for a while, and maybe through no fault of your own, you were laid off, or during COVID, a lot of people unfortunately have lost their jobs because of companies closing. Maybe you've been doing some volunteer work since that time. It would be relevant for you to add that so that an employer can see what you've been doing with that time off, and you could highlight some skills that may be relevant to the job that you're looking for. If you're a student and you've had co-op placements, you definitely want to put those on your resume as well, because those can help to speak to skills that you've developed, how you worked with a work team, what your work ethic was. Did you go into the placement on time? Did you do anything over and above on the placement? Those types of things. The point of the resume is to give the reader a picture of what you can do. If you have any gaps in your employment dates, for whatever reason, you don't want the dates to stand out. So you want to try and include those in a way that they show with the rest of the text. They're not large font, they're not bolded, but you want to kind of just make sure that that goes along with the rest of the resume. And you want to limit your points. So if you've got 10 points under each experience or past job that you had, you might lose the reader. They may get bored after a while. It may be too much for them to take in, and they may just move on to the next resume. So you want to have at least 2 points, but probably no more than 6. And you want to have a combination, as we said before, of tasks, so actual things that you did, and accomplishments, how well you did those things. So duties and accomplishments. Duties tell us what you actually did, but the accomplishments tell us why what you did was useful, how it was valuable, and how it was important to the company. So here are some examples of duties. Coordinated volunteers at a weekly soup kitchen meal program, answered a 10-line phone system, maintained accurate travel records and receipts for a 13-person division, provided one-on-one tutoring in basic reading, writing, and math skills, operated a 2,000-ton metal stamping press machine. So these job duties tell me kind of what the everyday task was for the individual while they worked at their job. If I'm looking at accomplishments, I want to look at any particular successes that you had as a result of those duties. Anything that you did over and above. Were you recognized for particular accomplishments? Did you do anything to increase efficiency, increase number of customers? Were you recognized as a result of the great work that you did while you were at your job? So here are some examples of what would be accomplishment statements. The first one is earned 98.8% customer satisfaction rating on every annual evaluation for 5 consecutive years. Planned and scheduled over 25 tours per week, increasing service by 25%. Coordinated a community event involving 150 individuals and raised $4,000 for charity. So you can see here that this gives a little bit more information in terms of the effect, the positive effect, the successes that the person had in relation to their duties. So I know that this person had a 98.8% customer satisfaction rating over 5 years. That speaks a lot to their ability to be able to provide excellent service to a customer. I know that someone's able to plan over 25 tours. So if I'm a tour guide and I need someone who can work in a really fast-paced environment, planning lots of tours, this may be the person that I'm looking at because they're able to quantify for me how many tours they did and that they increased service by 25%. And then the next one tells me that this person coordinated community events. I know how many individuals they were able to coordinate for. So if I'm coordinating an event for 10 people, the logistics are going to be different than if I'm coordinating an event for 150 or more people, and how much money that person was able to bring in as a result of this fundraising charity event. So it tells me a little bit more about the person and their capabilities and their successes than just a regular duty statement. So if you're looking at doing this for yourself and adding these types of accomplishment statements on your resume, here are some of the questions that you could potentially ask yourself. So what makes you great at your job? Either the job that you currently had or jobs that you've had in the past. And was there anything specific that was special that you did at work, that you were recognized for while you were at work? Did you get some kind of award? Were you recognized for doing something over and above, kind of typically what would be expected of you? Was there something that you did to improve things at work? So you somehow made things run more smoothly, you made things more efficient, you increased customer satisfaction survey ratings. Was there a big problem that existed at your organization and you helped to solve it? So if you're able to ask yourself some of these questions and look back at situations where you were able to shine using your skills at work, you could write those into accomplishment statements on your resume. So how would you go about writing an accomplishment statement? So the first thing you would need would be your action verb. So the thing, the action that you actually took. So if we look at the first example, this person implemented something. And what they implemented, the actual detail, was a new warehousing system. And then what was the result of that? So the result was that this new warehousing system that they implemented actually reduced waste at the company by 10%. So it tells the verb what they did, what they actually accomplished, so the actual results. And usually if you're able to put numbers to quantify something, then that gives the reader a greater understanding of what the effect was that you were able to have. So the second one is operated. So if we look back at our original resume and the person was trying to get a job in retail doing cash register work, this person operated a cash register to provide great customer service to 30 customers per day. So if I work in a little boutique store and I know that I have X number of customers coming in per day, and I want to make sure I'm able to hire someone who can deal with that traffic, seeing this accomplishment statement on the resume would give me the confidence to call that person, knowing that they could handle a high volume of people coming into the store. And then these would be what you had as a duty, so reorganizing the warehouse, and then looking at the accomplishment statement that we created from that duty. So I reorganized the warehouse, but the accomplishment is I implemented a new warehouse system that increased efficiency and cut down on waste by 10%. So the accomplishment statement definitely tells me more about the person's capabilities than the duty statement does. And the same thing with the cash register. If I just ran the cash register, it maybe doesn't tell me as much as knowing how many people I was able to help while I was on cash duty. So if we look at some kind of generic things that people always put on their resume, people always put this excellent team member or excellent team player. How could we make that a little bit more meaningful? So we could write directly involved in project team, developing and implementing health and safety practices and policies for a staff of 300 throughout the corporate distribution center. You can see that that second statement gives me way more information than the first generic statement, excellent team member. I have a greater understanding of the fact that the person worked with a project team, that they helped to develop, and not only develop, but then implement the health and safety practices. So what the team was responsible for, and how many people were positively impacted by this action. So there were staff of 300 people throughout the entire distribution center that had the positive results of these implementations of practices and policies. The next example is volunteered for children's hockey teams. So if I'm adding this volunteer experience, maybe I'm fresh out of school and I don't have a lot of paid work, how could I change that to tell the employer a little bit more about what that means and what my capabilities are? So if I write that I coached and mentored youth, so that those words coached and mentored tell me a little bit more about what the person actually had to do. Coaching requires very specific skills. Mentoring requires very specific skills. It means I'm able to instruct. It probably means that I'm patient. It tells the ages of the children. So if I'm looking at someone who can work in a preschool, after school program, then knowing that someone can work with ages 4 to 10 might be valuable for me to know as an employer. The person helped volunteering in hockey and life skills development. So not only do they know how to instruct a sport, but they also know how to give instruction and help someone, counsel and coach someone around life skills development, which is a different set of skill sets. They dedicated 5 to 10 hours a week for over 6 months a year. So it tells me that the person was committed to this particular volunteer opportunity. And this statement gives me more information about the person who's applied for the job than that first generic statement does. So after we've listed all of our experiences, we would then look at education, training, and certificates. So here you're going to list anything, again, that is relevant to the position or the industry or the sector that you're trying to get into. So are you a member of any associations? Did you get a certificate for excellence in a particular sector or skill that's relevant to the job? Definitely any formal education that you have that is relevant, especially if a job description is asking for you to have formal education. You want to highlight on your resume that you have that education that the resume is asking for. And then what else makes you stand out? So what else could you add to the resume at the end that would be important and relevant for the employer to know, and that would maybe make you stand out from the other people that are going to apply to the job? So is there anything that you've done in the community that's related to the job that you're applying for? Is there anything that you've done in the community that is somehow related to the company that you're applying to work with? Do you know about their community involvement and anything that they've done that speaks to something that you've also been involved in that you could add? Do you have any areas of interest, again, that are relevant? So if I'm applying to be a designer, I don't know if it's relevant necessarily that I like reading mystery novels. But something that would be of interest or a hobby that you have that is related to the job would be okay for you to add. Awards and recognition. So we talked about this before. You're probably kind of peppering these into your resume, into the accomplishment statements. But if you have any formal awards, if you've been formally recognized by a governing body in your sector or by a previous employer and you want to add that, then adding it at the end is a great place to do that. And then the last thing would be any memberships or associations that are, again, relevant to the job that you're applying for. So if we're looking at basic resume guidelines, you want to make sure that you've got some white space around, the chunk of material that you've got on the resume, so at least a one inch margin. You don't want everything large. Your name obviously should be very bold and large at the top, but everything else should be around 11 or 12 font so that it's easily readable. You want to pick a font that's easy to read. So kind of the generic ones that people use are Arial, Times New Roman, Calibri. If you pick something that's too curvy or too like blocked, it may detract from the content of your resume, and it may cause the person reading your resume to kind of move on to the next one. You want to be consistent in your formatting because it shows details. So are you bolding consistently? Are you using the same font consistently? Are you using the same format in how you present the information consistently? And this one's really, really important. You want to make sure that you're using keywords throughout your resume. So most employers now, simply because it is more efficient for them, are using applicant tracking systems or scanning software to look at resumes when they have a job posting. So you can imagine if they're getting hundreds or thousands of resumes, they're not going to have one person looking at those or a group of people looking at the resumes. They want to narrow down the resumes that they think would be the best ones or people that are most suited for the job. And then they will perhaps have someone look at those narrowed down versions, or then call those other people in for a phone interview or in person. So how do I get these keywords? You're looking at the job description for the position that you're applying for, and you're looking at words that are valuable verbs, actions that people have done. So I formalized something, I counseled, I transformed, I advocated, those types of things. And if you yourself have used those skills, then you want to add those keywords to your resume. You're also looking at maybe software that is relevant that they've mentioned on the job description, because you want to add those so you know, so that they know that you have those skills, and so their applicant tracking system can pick those up. So the more keywords that you have that match what's in the job description, the more likely it is that your resume will be picked up by the applicant tracking system. And one of my favorite ones, you want to make sure there are no spelling or grammar mistakes on the resume. One of the reasons this is important is it shows attention to detail, obviously. If you've got spelling and grammar mistakes on your resume, you probably didn't kind of review it with a fine-tooth comb. But also, if you're applying for a job where you may be a representative of the organization and you have to send out emails or regular correspondence to their clients or their business partners or community partners, I want to make sure as an employer that you're going to send out something that's readable, that doesn't have spelling and grammatical mistakes on it, because it's going to be representation of the company that has hired you. So some of the things you don't want to do or you don't want to add on your resume, personal pronouns like I. So you're writing in third person, using your name, or really just using verbs when you're talking about your experience rather than putting I advocated. You're just going to say advocated for. There's no reason that you would put your personal information on your resume. So I know maybe culturally in other places this is common, and perhaps we would put some kind of identifying information about ourselves on our resume, but we're not doing that here. So you don't want to have your social insurance number. No one should be asking for your social insurance number until you've been hired and you're filling out payroll forms. You don't need to add your date of birth, your marital status, your weight, or any of that stuff, unless you're a model, in which case they would want to know your weight and height and all those things. Then really that information is not relevant, nor should anyone be asking you for that information. You want to stay away from reasons why you may have left your previous job. If and when you have to address that, that's something that you would do in an interview, directly speaking to an employer, but it's definitely not something you want to put on your resume. And then you want to include the most relevant information. So past kind of 15 to 20 years, you don't need to add that. We're looking at maybe 10 years and less. What are the most recent jobs that you've had, or most recent skills that you've acquired as it relates to this job? And the next item would be resume formats. So we have been traditionally looking at and talking about a chronological resume. This is the one that's most popular. So it lists your experiences and history from the most recent to the oldest. So if you're currently working, you would have that job as the first job, and then any jobs that you've had since then down to the oldest would be listed underneath with the dates. This is the most popular resume format, chronological. And you want to keep in mind, if you're using the chronological format, that your current job, so if you're still at the job, your verbs will be in the current tense, in the present tense. If they are past jobs, so jobs that you had in the past, then any verbs that you are using to describe your duties or accomplishments will be in the past. So I instructed, I assisted, I outperformed. These are things that I did in the past. If I'm currently doing them, I counsel, I advocate, I participate. These are things that I'm currently doing at my current job. Another format that you could use is a functional resume. So this one is more skills based, and you would use a functional resume if you perhaps don't have a lot of experience to put on a resume. And so if you maybe only had one job before, two jobs, your resume would have a lot of white space on it. So you could use the functional one so that you're focusing more on your skills and accomplishments. Also, if you're trying to maybe get into a new sector of work or a new field of work, you would want to highlight your skills as they relate to this new sector, because perhaps your experience has been in a different industry. And so again, you don't want to spend a lot of the employer's time kind of reading through the past work history when you really should be focusing on what hard skills, what soft skills, what transferable skills do I have that are now relevant that I could use for this new type of work that I'm trying to get into. And then you could do a combination of both. This is not the most popular one. People tend to use chronological or functional, but the combination is exactly as it says, a combination of the two. So you would highlight your skills at the top, and then you would do some chronological bullet points of your past work experiences at the bottom. You can always the internet is a great source for templates for resumes. So I encourage you to do a Google search for resume templates, and you can find resume templates not only for these formats, chronological, functional, or skills-based, but even for specific industries. So if I wanted to be a legal administrative assistant, what kind of template would I use for that? If I'm trying to get into retail, what should my resume look like? If I'm trying to get into training, what should my resume look like? So the internet is a great place to go and find not only these formats, but actual templates for the types of things that you would add if you're looking to work in a particular industry. So remember that your resume is an advertisement for you. It's your calling card, it's your marketing piece, it's the first bit of information that an employer sees about you. It's their first introduction to you that kind of entices them and gets them interested in wanting to call you in for an interview. So if you look at your own resume right now and consider everything that we've talked about, my question is, would you hire you? And time for questions.
So yeah, just a call to see if anybody has any questions out there about getting their the formatting of their resume or how to get things set up to be found. It doesn't look like we have anything right now. You must have answered everybody's questions.
Okay. Well, I believe people have my email, and I know some people have reached out to me on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
So if they have questions, or I mean, I even had one person send me their resume while we were chatting, so I was able to kind of give some feedback right away. I have no issues with reviewing anyone's resume and giving them feedback that's constructive that'll help them.
Okay, and or maybe just spend a minute or two at one of the tables when we wrap up here, and if anybody comes by, they can ask
Sure.
you questions, and if not, you can get back to work and get your weekend started.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Jacqueline.
you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for your presentation.
All right.